Dorks. Not you guys, but that is what we're going to be talking about today. You know the type. Awkward, cringy, just zero coolness factor. In my last video, we took a look at some cartoon bullies, but while making that video, I kept thinking about the people that got bullied by them and which of them might just be the biggest dork out of all of them. So today we're going to be taking a look at over 20 different cartoon characters to find out who's the dorkiest of them all. First things first, let's get the nerd of it all out of the way. You might think of nerds and dorks as sort of interchangeable, but I tend to disagree. Some characters can definitely be nerds and dorks, but it doesn't always overlap. Nerds are usually more like focused on their studies more than anything else. Think of like your Lisa Simpsons or your Gretchen from Recess. Dorks, on the other hand, don't always have to be smart. These are characters that just sort of can't help being awkward and cringy, and maybe just a little bit out there. Think like your Milhouses. By the way, I'm allowed to talk about this because you might not know it from looking at me, but I'm actually a giant dork myself. So this is all coming from a place of love for my fellow dorks. Let's kick things off with Chester McBadbat from Fairly OddParents. Now, I could have included AJ, but he sort of falls more into like the nerd category. Even Timmy Turner himself could definitely be classified as a dork here and there. But I feel like Chester just sort of encompasses the term more than any of the other characters in the show. He's like your classic sidekick dork. Not too strange or weird, but definitely just the right amount to land himself on this list. Not quite smart enough to really be considered a nerd, but he can definitely be seen sort of as a punching bag for the school bully Francis. He's rocking the braces. His dad is a failed baseball player who wears a paper bag on his head. And I'm fairly certain I've seen him fight more than one raccoon throughout the course of the show. He's a fun and lovable character for sure, but he's undeniably a dork. Chester's gonna go on B tier. SpongeBob Squarepants. SpongeBob is sort of like a quintessential dork. He's upbeat, earnest, and just full of heart, but he's also obnoxious and just completely oblivious to anything socially going on. I mean, just take a look at the episode where he throws a big house party but then just micromanages everything the entire time. Absolute dork energy. This guy wears a tie to work every day to flip patties, can't drive even after years of taking boating school, and seems to cry at the drop of a hat. Another very lovable dork, but definitely a dork nonetheless. Gonna go B tier for him as well. Doug Funny from Doug. Another titular character, Doug might not come off as much of a dork as these previous two characters, but he still fits the bill. He's awkward, nervous, constantly overthinking everything. He spends half of his time daydreaming about his alter egos like Quail Man, who is a superhero that wears tighty whities. So even his alter ego isn't really that cool. He's well-meaning and he doesn't really like embarrass himself too much outwardly. I do think he's definitely not as bad as some of these other characters, so let's go C tier. Carl Wheezer from Jimmy Neutron. Carl is like dork royalty. He's got asthma, allergies, is obsessed with llamas for some reason, and he has a voice that just sounds like he's constantly mid-sneeze. He's awkward, whiny, terrified of everything, and hopelessly in love with his best friend's mom. But I mean, honestly, I get it. Like, can you blame him? Carl might just be one of the most iconic dorks of the last 20 years. He's going on S tier, without a single shred of a doubt. Sheen Estevez, Jimmy Neutron. You just can't talk about Carl without mentioning Jimmy's other right-hand dork, Sheen. Sheen is what happens when you give a dork unlimited energy and zero self-awareness. He's loud, obnoxious, hyperactive, and has basically no filter between his mouth and his brain. When we talk about characters that are dorks and not really nerds, Sheen is kind of the blueprint of that. Not quite on the same level as Carl, but still an ultra dork. I'm gonna go A tier. Irwin, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Irwin's biggest downfall might be the fact that he's just completely unaware of how uncool he is. He'll try way too hard to come off as cool and just end up making himself look like more of a dork in the end. He's part nerd, part wannabe rapper, and full-blown disaster. From talking in outdated slang to just fully simping for Mandy, who basically wants nothing to do with him. He's very confident, I'll give him that. But maybe he shouldn't be. Irwin's climbing right to the top of the cringe ladder and landing on S tier. Sammy from Rocket Power. Now, Sammy might not be as cool as his buddies. Like, he's smart, great with computers, and a little bit of a wuss. Like, in comparison with his friends, he sticks out like a helmet-wearing sore thumb. While they're catching some gnarly air, Sam might be on the sidelines just sort of making sure his knee pads are on correctly. But let's get one thing straight. Even though he might not be as cool as his pals, I think Sammy might be cooler than most of the other people on this list. Yeah, he might make sure that his safety gear is on correctly or try to figure out the trajectory of a jump before he hits it. But that's the thing, he still does it. Even though he's definitely a little bit of a dork, this kid plays hockey and is actually a great goalie throughout the show, and he can keep up with his friends while biking or skating, even though he might be the first one to wipe out. Sam's a dork for sure, but he's a dork that plays sports and can shred almost as well as his friends. If it wasn't for his smarts or his caution, he honestly might not even be considered a dork. I'm gonna put Sammy on D tier. Jimmy, Ed, and Eddie. Jimmy might be the most delicate dork on our whole list. He's sensitive, dramatic, and just constantly teetering on the edge of a full-blown crying meltdown. He does have a little bit of bully immunity being best friends with Sarah, but he's still a dork through and through. This kid's voice might just be enough to get him swirlied, not to mention the constant tea parties. Total dork, going on A tier. Just don't tell Sarah. Goofy, making his third appearance in one of my videos. Goofy might be more of a klutz or, a goof compared to an actual dork. But growing up constantly watching both of the Goofy movies, he's got total dad dork energy. He means well, he's sweet, and he cares so much for his son Max. But let's be real. If you were in Max's position and your dorky ass dad showed up at your college to take classes with you, you'd probably have the same reaction. He's clumsy, silly, oblivious, and just constantly being a goof. I think we can safely say C tier for Goofy. Greg, over the garden wall. Greg is sort of like a pure, unfiltered dork, but in the most whimsical way possible. This kid marches to the beat of his own kazoo, literally. He's like the kind of awkward but charming dork that doesn't really realize how big of a dork he is. From naming animals that he finds in the wild to rocking a teapot on his head like it's the latest fashion trend. He's weird, lovable, and just a complete oddball, but in the most charming way possible. Greg's going on A tier. Dipper Pines, Gravity Falls. Dipper definitely has some dorky traits going on. He's awkward around girls, overthinks everything, is obsessed with all the conspiracies and weird things going on in town. And let's not forget the song. But outside of all of that, he's brave, resourceful, and just full of adventure. When he's not failing to flirt with Wendy, he's straight up spending his summer battling mystical creatures, solving mysteries, and if it wasn't for him, Bill Cipher may have just taken over the world. He's got some dorky moments here and there, but not nearly as much as some of these other characters. He's a bit of a weirdo, but he's a heroic weirdo. I'm gonna put him on D tier. Gus from Recess. Gus sort of has perpetual new kid energy. He's awkward, soft-spoken, and just easily flustered. But he's also a military kid moving from town to town due to his dad's career. So he just never really seems too sure of himself or where he fits in. I think you give him a few years with his group of friends from the show and he comes out the other side much more confident. But as of the show, he's not that cool, but not a lost cause. So I'm gonna go C tier. Velma, Scooby-Doo. Velma's easily the smartest person in the whole Mystery Inc. gang, but all that brain power comes with just a bit of dorkiness. From losing her glasses every 5 minutes to delivering science lessons while being chased by a ghost. She's brainy and book smart, but that's not always the best combo when you're dealing with haunted houses. She's sort of like your classic nerd/dork hybrid. Brainy, but just a bit clumsy. But she is usually the one that figures out what's going on in the end. So I'm gonna put her on C tier. Steve Smith, American Dad. Steve is sort of like your textbook modern dork. A D&D playing, always singing, glasses wearing, girl crazy dork. His best friends are 3 fellow dorks, a talking fish, and an alien. Yet he still might be the weirdest one out of the bunch. I will say he's almost strangely confident, but that's usually pretty undeserved and tends to be a downfall. He'll take a shot with any girl that comes his way, but it barely ever works out. The kid's got a voice of an angel though, can't deny that. But even with the soulful singing, I don't think he's ever making it out of dork territory. Steve's going on A tier. Andrew, Big Mouth. Now where Steve Smith's puberty-ridden brain might cause him to be a bit awkward and cringy, Andrew is just sort of puberty personified. He's neurotic, insecure, anxious, and just so damn horny 24/7. He is just a walking, talking disaster of adolescence. This kid basically knows nothing at this point besides humiliation and horniness. He's constantly overthinking everything, but usually to the wrong conclusions, which just sort of messes his life up more and more. I thought my middle school years were rough, but at least I wasn't Andrew. S tier. Morty Smith, Rick and Morty. Morty is a dork. He's anxious, awkward, and just always out of his depth, whether it comes to talking to girls or going on the crazy adventures that he gets dragged along. But to be fair, if my grandpa was Rick, I'd probably be a ball of anxiety too. But even with the Rick of it all, he manages to show some flashes of confidence and even some real bravery from time to time. He might scream or let off a few "Aw Jesus" while being chased by like gun-toting alien bounty hunters. But he just sort of skirts the line between like actually being brave and just being scared out of his mind the whole time. So I don't think he's going to go too high on my list. Honestly, at this point, I think he's becoming less and less of a dork throughout the show. Still a bit of a dork though. So let's go C tier. Tina Belcher, Bob's Burgers. Tina is peak awkward. She's monotone, socially anxious, obsessed with butts and erotic friend fiction. She loves horses, zombies, and just sighing at every single expense. But she's also pretty confident in her own dorkiness and just sort of completely unashamed about it. She knows who she is, and who she is as a dork, and she completely accepts it. And for that self-assured awkwardness, I'm gonna go B tier. Butters, South Park. Butters is one of the most tragic yet lovable dorks out there. He's naive, overly trusting, and almost always being manipulated, usually by Cartman. The kid loves tap dancing and playing make-believe. His personality is almost like an 80-year-old man stuck inside a child's body. But despite everything, he's always just full of optimism, even when he shouldn't be. He's not as like cringy and awkward as some of these others, but he's still pretty up there. I'm gonna go A tier. Milhouse, The Simpsons. Just like how his counterpart Nelson might be one of the most iconic bullies of all time, Milhouse might just be the most iconic dork. This kid is just like a magnet for dorkiness. Like, think of the dorkiest thing you could ever imagine to happen to somebody. It's probably happened to Milhouse throughout the span of the show. The kid's allergic to everything, terrified of everything, and hopelessly in love with his best friend's sister. If you take like 30 dictionaries and look up the word dork, I'm willing to bet at least $1 that one of those books has a picture of Milhouse right there. S tier, 100%. Chris Griffin, Family Guy. Chris is sort of like a special kind of dork. He's got the cluelessness of a classic dork, the awkwardness of a puberty-ridden teenager that might just never get through it, and a voice that makes you think he might not know how to breathe out of his nose. He might not be like the smartest tool in the shed. In fact, there's sometimes he might not even know where the shed is. But even without that nerdiness there, he's a dork through and through. Chris pretty much exists purely in a state of constant cringe. He's not as aggressively dorky as some of the others here, but he's pretty up there. Chris is going on A tier. And last up on our list, this one actually comes strictly from one single movie, but I felt like he just had to be included here. The Know-It-All Kid from Polar Express. I have never in my life wanted to bully somebody so badly. Bullying is not cool. I know I've sort of been like making fun of characters this whole time, but that's because I can do what I want. But this fucking kid, I would give up my own lunch money to be able to give this kid a swirly. His voice, his attitude, his general vibe, it's like he was created in a lab purely to be the dorkiest dork in the whole world. This is a movie about a bunch of kids riding a magical train on Christmas Eve to meet Santa at the North Pole. And I think the most unrealistic thing in this movie is that nobody gave this kid a wedgie. He might not have like a real name, but if he did, I feel like I'd hate it. This kid is the absolute worst. S tier. And there you have it, my list of animated dorks throughout the years. And remember, if you're a bit of a dork, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a bit of a dork. All my friends are dorks. My kids are probably going to grow up to be big dorks. And that's okay. And remember, bullying is not okay, even if that person is a little weird or dorky. Unless you're on a magical train on your way to see Santa on Christmas Eve, in which case, I would 100% understand. Thanks for watching.